Well, listen, if you don't have anything to say, you blab. You just go on and 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 on.
Voters do not agree with these despicable women on The View. They are wildly out of touch with the vast majority of Americans, and frankly, they should seek immediate help.
For decades, The View was synonymous with one name, Whoopi Goldberg. She wasn't just a host, she was the undeniable nucleus of the show, its gravitational center, pulling every discussion, every viewpoint into her orbit. Imagine daytime television without her. For many, it was almost inconceivable. She commanded the table with an authority that bordered on regal, a queen holding court in the realm of morning talk shows. Her opinions weren't just shared, they were delivered as pronouncements, often eclipsing dissenting voices and shaping the narrative with an iron will. Guests, even seasoned personalities, often found themselves navigating a conversational landscape meticulously sculpted by Whoopi, their voices carefully managed, sometimes curtailed. She wielded influence with a practiced hand, ensuring The View reflected her perspective, her agenda, with unwavering consistency. But the illusion of unbreakable control is just that, an illusion. And one day, in a moment witnessed by millions, the facade cracked. The carefully constructed edifice of Whoopi's dominance began to crumble, not gradually, but in a sudden, jarring spectacle of live television. It was a moment of unforeseen vulnerability, a dramatic unraveling that few could have predicted, and even fewer could ignore. This wasn't just a shift in dynamics, it was a seismic event that shook the very foundation of The View.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time.
To truly grasp the magnitude of what unfolded, you need to understand the established order, the unchallenged empire Whoopi Goldberg had built at The View. For years, she wasn't merely a panelist, she was the architect of the show's identity, the ultimate arbiter of acceptable discourse. Her presence was a force field, shaping not only the topics discussed, but the very tone of the conversation. She possessed an uncanny ability to steer debates, to subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, guide the narrative, ensuring it aligned with her worldview. Her opinions weren't offered tentatively, they were delivered with a conviction that brooked little argument, often presented as self-evident truths that required no further justification. This wasn't simple hosting, it was a meticulously crafted performance of power, a masterclass in dominating the dynamics of a panel discussion. She had honed the art of shutting down dissenting viewpoints, often with a well-timed quip or a dismissive wave of the hand, effectively silencing perspectives that challenged her own. This wasn't just about expressing opinions, it was about controlling the flow of information, dictating the boundaries of acceptable dialogue, and maintaining an iron grip on the show's ideological direction. She had, in essence, constructed a fortress of influence around herself, transforming The View into her personal domain, a kingdom where her voice reigned supreme and unchallenged.
That was so good. Well, listen, if you don't have anything to say, you blab. You just go on and 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 on.
Right.
That's what you hear.
Yeah.
When they don't have anything to hold you with, nothing to make you think about what they have to say.
The day the tectonic plates shifted began with an air of deceptive normalcy, a veneer of routine that masked the impending upheaval. The studio audience settled into their seats, anticipating the usual blend of daytime banter and politically charged commentary. On set, the familiar panel assembled, each member poised to play their expected role in the daily performance of The View. Smirks were exchanged, loaded glances telegraphed unspoken agreements, and the well-rehearsed choreography of head nods and supportive murmurs commenced. It was, on the surface, just another episode, another day in the predictable cycle of morning television. The agenda was set, the talking points prepped, and the left-leaning narrative primed to unfold. Then, Karoline Leavitt was introduced. Her arrival seemed almost unremarkable, a standard-issue guest segment slotted into the day's programming, another political figure stepping into the lion's den of The View, ready to face the panel's pointed questions and predictable critiques. No one in that studio, from the seasoned producers in the control room to the casual viewers tuning in at home, could have possibly foreseen the dramatic unraveling that was mere moments away. It began as just another day at The View, steeped in familiar routines and predictable dynamics. Little did they know, the script was about to be spectacularly rewritten.
The most divisive and disgusting speech that any president, certainly in my lifetime, has ever given. He essentially waged war on half of the country by saying that we are all a threat to democracy because we believe in putting America first. It's not radical to want to put your country and your own people first. It's not radical to want to have a strong border, a strong military, and to unleash the might of your own economy, not economies around the world.
The conversation meandered, as it often does on The View, touching on various topics until it inevitably gravitated towards the charged subject of wokeness. This term, within the ideological ecosystem of The View, transcended mere political jargon. It was practically elevated to a sacred tenet, a core principle of their worldview, defended with an almost religious zeal. It wasn't just a concept they endorsed, it was woven into the very fabric of their show, perceived as the bedrock of their progressive identity, the moral compass guiding their commentary. Whoopi, radiating an air of unshakable confidence within her perceived ideological stronghold, seized the moment. Feeling utterly secure in her domain, she locked her gaze onto Karoline, a subtle smirk playing on her lips, the kind of smirk that often preceded a pronouncement of unchallengeable authority. With a tone laced with what she clearly intended to be dismissive condescension, she delivered the now infamous line, pointed directly at Karoline, "Without wokeness, you wouldn't even have this job." The words hung in the studio air, heavy with unspoken assumptions and thinly veiled contempt. Intended as a casual jab, a minor put-down designed to subtly undermine Karoline's credibility, the remark detonated with the force of a verbal landmine. The immediate reaction was palpable, a sudden and dramatic shift in the studio's atmosphere. The studio audience, previously relaxed and engaged in the comfortable rhythm of the show, audibly gasped, a collective intake of breath that signaled a profound shift in the dynamic. The forced smiles plastered on the faces of the other hosts faltered, replaced by expressions of barely concealed unease. Even Joy Behar, a seasoned veteran of countless on-air skirmishes and provocations, visibly recoiled, a flicker of genuine discomfort crossing her usually unflappable countenance. The air, once buzzing with the predictable energy of daytime television, instantly curdled, thick with tension and the unspoken anticipation of something momentous about to unfold.
About to drop some more truth that will be hard for them to ignore.
You know, we have seen cultural Marxism trickling its way through every institution in this country. The public school system, the higher education university system, Hollywood, big tech, the corrupt mainstream media that I fought against in President Trump's White House are indoctrinating my generation of Americans into hating our country, hating one another based on race and gender and all of this other BS, quite frankly.
But Karoline Leavitt's response defied all expectations, shattering the anticipated script of daytime television confrontation. There was no knee-jerk defensiveness, no flustered stammering, no panicked retreat into pre-prepared talking points. Instead, a reaction of startling composure unfolded. Her features remained remarkably calm, betraying no hint of offense or intimidation. Then, a slow, almost unnerving smile bloomed across her face, a smile that was far more potent than any shouted retort could have been. It wasn't the smug grin of someone scoring a cheap point. It was a knowing smile, the quiet confidence of someone who possessed an unshakable inner certainty, armed with facts and an unflappable demeanor. And then, with a measured calmness that bordered on chilling, she began to meticulously dismantle Whoopi's condescending assertion, brick by verbal brick. She didn't descend into emotional appeals or engage in personal attacks, the typical currency of daytime TV squabbles. Instead, she weaponized facts, deploying cold, hard numbers with surgical precision. She cited government spending reports, meticulously detailing the flow of taxpayer dollars into what she pointedly labeled ludicrously woke programs. Her examples were specific, jarringly concrete, gender studies initiatives funded in distant nations, bizarre and arguably inappropriate adaptations of beloved children's shows, repurposed to promote specific, often divisive social agendas globally, and a dizzying array of other eyebrow-raising initiatives that collectively raised far more questions than they provided answers. With each carefully chosen detail, with each precisely cited figure, she methodically connected the dots, painting a stark picture of how wokeness, once ostensibly a social movement advocating for inclusivity, had seemingly morphed into a potent and potentially problematic political tool. A tool, she implied, that was being wielded to silence dissent, enforce ideological conformity, and punish those who dared to question its increasingly expansive and, to some, questionable tenets.
In a statement afterwards, this young lady claimed her, quote, on-air snub proves that you-know-who will not be treated fairly in the upcoming debate. Now, do you think this is going to make people doubt whether CNN can stay objective, or is this more the same of, everybody's against me, it's all rigged, I tell you. Is everything rigged?
No, it's their MO. That's what they do. Rachel Maddow said last week, she's like, if the election is lost, it was rigged. If there's a debate, then the moderators are probably biased and they're prejudiced against me.
Whoopi Goldberg, the undisputed champion of the quick-witted retort, the master of the dismissive gesture, was suddenly visibly thrown off balance. The trademark smirk, her on-air signature of confident authority, abruptly vanished, as if wiped clean from her face, replaced by a stark expression of stunned disbelief bordering on bewilderment. Her hands, usually employed to gesticulate with forceful conviction, now fluttered nervously, aimlessly, as if desperately searching for something solid to grasp, some verbal anchor to cling to in the rapidly shifting conversational currents. She was a performer accustomed to controlling the stage, to orchestrating the flow of dialogue, to anticipating and deflecting challenges with practiced ease. She was used to guests stumbling, faltering under her rapid-fire questioning, struggling to maintain their composure in the face of her relentless verbal pressure. But in this moment, the dynamic had undergone a seismic reversal. The tables had not just turned, they had been flipped upside down. No matter how fiercely her ingrained instincts urged her to clap back, to regain command, to steer the conversation back onto familiar, comfortable terrain, she found herself inexplicably paralyzed. Karoline wasn't offering her an opening, wasn't providing a verbal foothold for Whoopi to regain her footing. In that electrically charged silence, a truth became starkly, undeniably clear to everyone watching. Whoopi Goldberg, the seemingly invincible force of daytime television, had maneuvered herself into a corner, a rhetorical trap of her own making, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there appeared to be no easy, no graceful escape. She opened her mouth as if to speak, to launch into a counter-argument, but the words seemed to catch in her throat, failing to materialize. She snapped her mouth shut, then opened it again. A silent pantomime of frustrated articulation. Still nothing. The carefully constructed edifice of her verbal dominance had crumbled, leaving behind only an awkward, gaping silence. The audience, conditioned to respond with enthusiastic applause or vocal agreement to Whoopi's pronouncements, remained frozen, collectively unsure how to react, trapped in the uncomfortable cross-currents of this unexpected power shift. Even the most devoted, die-hard fans of The View seemed bewildered, caught in a moment of collective cognitive dissonance, unsure whether to laugh, to clap, or simply to wait in stunned silence for Whoopi to utter anything at all, to reclaim her lost command. Even the usually ever-present camera crew, the unseen chroniclers of daytime drama, seemed to hesitate, caught in a moment of professional indecision. Should they zoom in relentlessly on Whoopi's shell-shocked visage, relentlessly capturing the raw, unvarnished moment of her public realization? Or should they desperately, almost frantically, cut to commercial, hoping against hope that the viewers at home wouldn't fully grasp the profound and potentially irreversible power shift they had just witnessed?
Yeah. I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation.
However, this moment of stunned silence, this on-air unraveling, was not an isolated anomaly. It was a symptom, a highly visible manifestation of a deeper, more systemic ailment afflicting The View, a problem that had been quietly festering, growing in intensity for years. Whoopi's unbridled outspokenness, her seemingly limitless appetite for controversy, her willingness to wade headfirst into politically and socially charged debates without without restraint had inadvertently transformed The View into something akin to a legal liability, a lawsuit magnet attracting legal challenges with alarming regularity. Over the preceding years, ABC, the network behemoth backing The View, had found itself repeatedly dragged through the mud of public controversy and legal battles, facing intense backlash and mounting legal fees stemming from a litany of on-air missteps, ranging from tone-deaf pronouncements on sensitive historical events to perplexing and often tone-deaf defenses of deeply problematic public figures. Whoopi, with her unfiltered commentary and penchant for pushing boundaries, had consistently occupied the epicenter of the show's most scandalous episodes, each controversy further fraying the network's nerves and straining its resources. But in recent times, the consequences of this freewheeling approach had become far more tangible, far more financially punitive. A veritable avalanche of defamation lawsuits had begun to crash against ABC's carefully constructed facade of daytime entertainment. The initial tremors began with Carrie Underwood, who found herself the target of on-air mockery and thinly veiled accusations for her perceived political leanings. Then came the aftershocks of Elon Musk, relentlessly painted as a dangerous and irresponsible figure by the panel, culminating in a legal challenge that sent shivers through the network's legal department. And now, looming on the horizon, the potential legal storm cloud of Karoline Leavitt, whose calm and factual rebuttal had exposed a vulnerability that ABC could no longer afford to ignore. Each lawsuit added to the mounting pressure, each legal challenge chipping away at the network's bottom line, making it increasingly agonizingly clear to ABC executives that the unfettered opinions dispensed on The View, particularly those of its most prominent hosts, were no longer just a source of ratings and buzz. They were becoming a significant and escalating financial risk.
The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason, because black people couldn't get into colleges, because women could not get into the colleges they wanted to go to. This is all women. Yeah. See, this is not black, Asian women. This is all women. Women were not invited to this party. It was a man's world, and we busted our...
And perhaps the most damaging aspect of this escalating crisis for ABC was the dawning realization that for once, Whoopi Goldberg could not deflect responsibility. She had no underling to blame, no convenient scapegoat to sacrifice to appease the mounting public outcry. The controversies, the legal threats, the plummeting advertiser confidence, they were all inextricably linked to her words, her actions, her carefully cultivated on-air persona. The relentless cycle of scandal, outrage, and damage control began to inflict irreparable damage on the once pristine image of The View. Advertisers, who had for years flocked to the show, drawn by its massive viewership and perceived cultural influence, began to exhibit signs of nervousness, then outright withdrawal. Initially, the exodus was subtle, almost imperceptible, a quiet shuffling of marketing budgets away from the increasingly volatile daytime program. But soon, the trickle became a noticeable stream, then a full-blown torrent, as major sponsors, the financial lifeblood of daytime television, began to publicly and definitively sever ties. The show's long-held reputation as a guaranteed ratings juggernaut, a reliable cash cow for the network, began to visibly tarnish, the golden sheen fading under the accumulating weight of repeated public relations disasters and escalating legal liabilities. Big-name sponsors, the very entities that fueled the daytime television ecosystem, started to engage in serious and increasingly urgent internal discussions, questioning whether the continued association with The View, with its inherent and seemingly uncontrollable volatility, was still a prudent business decision, whether the potential rewards outweighed the ever-multiplying risks. As the lawsuits piled up, each new legal challenge a fresh blow to the network's reputation and finances, and as the crucial advertising revenue began to hemorrhage, the cracks in the carefully constructed facade of The View widened into gaping fissures. The once seemingly unstoppable force, powered by Whoopi Goldberg's commanding presence and unwavering opinions, was now visibly faltering, teetering precariously on the precipice of irreversible decline. And then, in a move that reverberated throughout the entertainment industry, sending shockwaves through network boardrooms and celebrity gossip columns alike, Whoopi Goldberg's protracted and often turbulent reign at The View reached an abrupt and many suspected unceremonious conclusion. After decades of wielding unparalleled influence over the show, shaping its narrative, silencing dissenting voices, and effectively dictating the terms of daytime political discourse, the final decisive blow in the eyes of many industry insiders was delivered during that now infamous on-air confrontation with Karoline Leavitt. The public unraveling, the starkly visible display of her vulnerability in the face of calm, factual opposition had exposed a critical weakness, a chink in the armor of her seemingly impenetrable dominance, a vulnerability that ABC could no longer afford to overlook, let alone ignore. The network, sensing the impending collapse of their prized asset, scrambled to initiate a swift damage control operation, attempting to publicly spin the departure as a mutually agreed upon decision. A break for Whoopi, a pre-planned hiatus from the pressures of daytime television. But the carefully crafted PR narrative rang hollow, failing to convince industry insiders or even casual observers. The reality, whispered in hushed tones in network hallways and speculated about endlessly on social media, was far more brutal. She had been, in essence, let go. ABC, facing a mounting crisis of credibility and profitability, was in full-blown panic mode, desperately attempting to staunch the financial bleeding as advertisers continued their exodus and once loyal viewers, disillusioned by the constant controversies and perceived bias, began to question the show's very relevance, its very future. With Whoopi, the undisputed anchor and defining personality of The View, now gone, the show faces a monumental, perhaps existential crossroads. Will network executives, clinging to the remnants of a once successful formula, attempt to simply replicate the Whoopi model, seeking out another equally controversial, equally polarizing figure to step into the vacated role and maintain the volatile, controversy-driven status quo? Or will this forced reset, this dramatic upheaval, serve as a much-needed catalyst for genuine change, prompting a fundamental shift in direction, a move towards a more balanced, less overtly combative approach to daytime discussion? Is this the beginning of the end for The View as we have known it for so long, a slow, inevitable decline into irrelevance? Or could this unexpected turning point, this moment of forced reinvention, somehow pave the way for a surprising, perhaps even unlikely, resurgence? What do you think? Share your opinions, your predictions, your hopes and fears for the future of The View in the comments section below.